Hi, so today I wanted to go over the drop for Get It Together, which came out back in January. So yeah, let's just play it Alright, so of course we've got the stems here from Blue Lays, the acapella. I don't think I did much here. I did like a saturated vocal. You know, like a little distorted vocal of the main phrase, just to sort of end off the drop. Alright, vocal chop. How did I do the vocal chop? I chopped up a bunch of random ad-lib samples. So I didn't really chop up the original vocal. I did try to. It didn't go very well. I wasn't happy, so I just sort of went in, found a bunch of random ad-lib samples and just kind of messed around with those. Let's see. Yeah, I time stretched them to make them fit a little bit better because these are originally house samples. And then all the processing, as you can see. So let's just look at this first layer. This is without processing. Pretty dry. So then what we've got here is auto-tune, EQ, just dipping some of that. See, I wouldn't normally dip that. So the thing with this song is, it's from quite a while ago for me. So when I did make this song, I was not an epically good producer. Next we got OTT, not full percent, just 38%. Nectar, so just to get some more space. Glue compressor, because the OTT made it quite quiet. I did have a distortion plugin here, Temper, which is a free one, but I think I found it a bit too aggressive. Then over here, I'm boosting the main frequencies of the vocal chop. This area here, this 2000, 1500, where the vocal mainly has its body. Then we've got Ozone 10 dynamic EQ, just to sort of dip the highs when they come in a bit too much. Then we've got Ozone Imager, which is making it mono. So this is what I'm talking about with that Nectar harmony thing. It's a bit like, what are you doing? It's a silly moment for me. Charm Verb, so you know, Melda production plugins, they're great. Delay, EQ, OTT, removing the lows, Glue Comp, Kilohertz Haas, so I'm re-adding the width. Definitely look at the Haas stereo effect. So I've got a chain here, so we've got the wide layer. Panning vocal chops out to the sides, and then just the dry here in the middle. And then I have gain stages, so down 16 dB. That's the vocal chop. And then this as well. Okay, so effects. Effects processing I'll quickly talk about because obviously we all know just add downlifters, rises, fallers, that sort of stuff. Make sure you're removing more low end than this. 60 Hertz isn't quite enough. I normally go like 80 to 110 just to keep the low end out of the sub area, because like impacts like this one here normally have quite a lot of low end. So yeah, just be careful with that if you are adding effects, especially lots of effects, but just chew up headroom. Also a little bit of reverb doesn't hurt, gives more space. Chords. So the chords are just the stems that Blue Lace sent me. I just changed a little high frequency. You know that. Excuse my terrible singing. But yeah, it's just that little bit there I've changed for some variation. So the chord layers, I've frozen the tracks, otherwise my CPU would die. I was automating the LFO rate here. As you can see, it's a bit messy, but it works. So the processing for chords stacks. This is like a crash course in how I would do it. You have 3 layers, 4 sometimes. First layer is like a main layer. You would have just like a normal super saw, 9 voices unitune, a little bit detuned, and then you'd have a second oscillator that's also a saw wave, 9 voices unison, 7, and then you make that a little bit wider, make it quieter, and also put it up an octave. I'll unfreeze this track, just so I can show you, because I'm pretty sure that's what this layer is. Yeah, so I've gone a bit heavy on the unison here, but as you can see, there's 1 octave up here. The level is being automated by the LFO, but it would normally probably be going a little bit up to like this midway point here. And then also layering with a bit of bright white noise, which adds just a little bit of brightness to the supersaw. And then I've also got a bit of chorus, just to make it a little bit wider. Flanger, for God knows why. But I guess flanger makes it interesting. And then EQ. So thin chord next, as you can hear, it's just meant to be like that solid in the middle, detune all the way down, just for that body. So in the processing here, you can see it's more focusing on those middle rather than the higher frequencies. OTT, glue compressor, and then gain staging all of these. This is the really wide layer. As you can see, I've got the kilohertz halves down here. That's what's giving it that real wide feel. And then on the group, I have just OTT, just kind of putting it all together. And then this EQ here. So I'm boosting here just to give it a little bit more body. Down here, I'm removing the frequencies there because I'm giving more space to the vocal chop, just to let there be room for those vocal chops to stand out, because that's where their main frequencies are as well. And then also ozone imager, just like very subtle, as you can see, like 11%. Okay, bass. For this first mid bass, this is a mid bass. I literally use this in every single track, gritty mid. Yeah, so it's a bit of FMing. So we've got the saw wave down an octave, and we have this electric guitar wavetable, which is here in the spectrals. The level's all the way down, and then yeah, just a little bit of FMing right there. And then same deal, LFO automating the volume of this first oscillator. Then also there's the white noise here, so that's what gives it that gritty feel, is distortion in the effects rack, so that when this LFO does bring it all the way up, it crunches, like the bass crunches with the white noise, like those low frequencies hit that white noise in the distortion, it all just kind of crunches together. Then I've got OTT, EQ, removing some of the highs and the low, because you don't want your mid basses clashing with the sub. This one I've just got a saw wave with the bend minus mode, 3 voices of unison, so it's kind of wide, as you can hear. Distortion again, phaser, as I said. Compressor for multiband dynamics, you know. And EQ, doing nothing. Cool. Okay, so here I'm ducking the highs again. And now I bring it up with some more distortion here with the saturator, 12 decibels. More ducking the highs. And also I'm cutting the lows. That's really important. When you add saturation to any sound, almost always you got to make sure you're following it up with an EQ just to cut the lows, because distortion just generates frequencies. Sub bass. Okay, so this is not what I would do for a sub bass anymore, I'll be clarify. I have an Ableton rack actually for my sub basses, but I think the sub's okay in this case. So anyway, we just have basic shapes. So we have distortion inside and just a compressor, just sort of not multiband, just like putting a level, like keeping it at a steady level, because certain frequencies when you're so low are louder. So if you try to really sort of watch the levels of your separate notes, like some artists actually will resample the sub bass and manually adjust the levels of each note in the audio file just to keep it at the same level. So next we have a glue compressor, just putting up the level. Then we have an EQ, just boosting that low 35 range and then cutting the highs. You normally want to have your main fundamental frequency, but then you have like a secondary higher frequency, because as producers we all work in these tend to be pretty fancy headphones. Right now I'm using DT700 Pros, so I can hear every little sound. If you're just chilling with the boys, 3 AM, eating beans, and you just got your crappy little speaker, obviously you're not going to be able to hear the sub frequencies, but that's why you have a secondary one that's about at 100 hertz, just to be the stand-in sub when your headphones or your whatever aren't so good. That's how professionals do it. So now I have another saturator and then another EQ and gain stage. Brass shots. They are a bit of a key part of this song. It fills out the frequency spectrum, gives impact, that's why I put it in. Just cutting the lows again, and then fresh air. If you don't have this plugin, you should get it. It's really good. So, drums. So nowadays my drum processing is more like pushing up the transients depending on what the song type is. If it's dubstep, I'm normally over here at 1 fully, which is like absolutely smashing. And then I've also got the crunch up a little bit, the boom. Boom's just like adding a sub to the kick. But in this song's case, I didn't want to overpower the sub bass. It's sort of there as the kick. The sub is the strongest part in the song, not the kick. Because when you are mixing a song, you need to choose. You can't have both, otherwise you're just going to get distortion and all that sort of stuff. Okay, kicks. So we have an oversampled kick, and then we have a Echo Soundworks kick, which I am doing a stereo effect to. And it's not stereo in that subfield. It's a bigger, more powerful kick. So for the snares, I'm just cutting the low. So we have this first one, just a cymatics one, which, I guess the thing is, these aren't the original snares. This first one is just a stretched out snare. I have had to replace the snares because I've lost them. Anyway, these are probably better snares. This snare, which I use in like all my tracks. This sort of more drippy sort of snare with reverb. And then this really like sharp drip, drill, whatever you want to call it, snare. And then on every second snare hit, so you have just a little reverse snare. You can hardly hear it anyway. So we have that drum fill. So I have some saturation. Then we have this other drum fill. Yeah, from the oversampled Future Bass pack. I think the thing with drum fills is don't overuse them and also don't make them stand out too much. Like I think the problem with the drum fills in this song is they're quite obvious. I don't personally like that. They kind of take away from the song rather than get you in it. So now we just have all the rides, crashes, cymbals, all that sort of stuff. So first, we just have one crash here. It just follows the kicks. So the reason for this is just brightening that kick. Then we have a little shaker loop, just for some rhythm. Very subtle. I panned it out a bit to the left. Over here, for the second half of the drop, a faster shaker loop, and then a hi-hat loop. Thing with crashes and cymbals and all that sort of stuff, panning them out gives it more width. And that's all the tracks. So as you can see, they're all gain staged. If you don't know what that means, look it up. Gain staging is important if you're going to make more soft pop EDM songs like this track. If you're making dubstep, it's worth knowing about, but you don't desperately need to know it. Anyway, I'll cover that in a mastering video. Anyway, hopefully this was useful, but I don't know, guys. I will hopefully do this another time. Bye.